Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the deep dive. We are so glad you're tuning in with us today.
Hi, everyone. It is great to be here.
Yeah,
We have a massive topic to cover today, one that feels a bit like a slow motion car crash that we're all sitting inside.
that is a cheerful image to start with. But seriously, I want to jump right in with a visualization that we came across. I want you to imagine walking into your local grocery store on a Tuesday evening.
Okay.
The lights are on, the freezers are humming, music's playing, but there's nobody there. And I don't mean it's slow, I mean there are no staff. The shelves are half empty, not because of some supply chain glitch, but because there was literally no one to unload the truck.
It feels like the opening scene of a post apocalyptic movie, doesn't it? Where all the infrastructure is still there, but the humans are just
It
gone.
does. Or take a more personal nightmare. You wake up sick, you call your doctor, and the receptionist says, "We can see you in 3 months."
Three
And
months.
not because they're on strike, not because of a holiday, but simply because there aren't enough doctors to go around.
It's terrifying. But the reality we need to confront today is that for millions of people in places like South Korea, Japan, and, increasingly parts of Europe, this isn't some nightmare scenario. It's just daily life.
Right. We're talking about the empty planet phenomenon. And I have to admit, when I first started looking into this, I felt a little confused. Because if you rewind to the 1990s or even the early 2000s, what was the big global fear?
Oh, overpopulation, the population bomb.
Exactly. We were told we were breeding ourselves into extinction. We thought the planet was going to burst at the seams. We had movies about it, books, policy papers, the whole thing.
And we were wrong. Or maybe a better way to put it is we're looking at the wrong curve. While we were all worrying about having too many people, the global demographic engine just quietly slammed on the brakes.
So, what we're living through now is a shift that human civilization has literally never seen before.
Never. We're moving from a fear of too many mouths to feed to a reality of having no hands to work.
So, today we're going to unpack this whole demographic transition. We need to understand why we stopped having kids, why we're living longer, and why, when you crash those two things together, it kind of breaks the economy.
It's a paradox, and it's one we are just not ready for.
Okay, let's start with the math because people hear population decline and they think, oh, maybe traffic will be better. But the numbers are, well, they're stark.
They are. To really understand the crisis, you have to understand one specific number 2.1. That's the replacement rate.
Walk us through that. Why 2.1? Why not just two? Mom and dad have two kids, they replace themselves. Simple.
In a perfect world, yes.
Huh.
But in the real world, not every child survives to adulthood to have their own children. So you need one for the mother, one for the father, and that little extra point 0.1 is the statistical buffer for mortality.
Got it.
So if a country's at 2.1, its population stays stable.
Okay, so 2.1 is the break even point. Where were we, say, 40 years ago?
In the 1980s, the global average was around 4 children per woman. We were way above replacement. The world was young and it's growing fast.
And today?
Globally, we're hovering just above 2.
Yeah.
But that average is really misleading because it averages out, booming populations in Africa with shrinking ones everywhere else. If you look at the developed world, the numbers have just fallen off a cliff.
The one that stood out for me was South Korea. I saw the number 0.78 and I thought it had to be a typo.
It's not a typo, it's a collapse.
Wait, 0.78.
Yep. It means for every 100 couples, you're getting fewer than 80 babies.
Well, let's just play that out, though. If you have a rate of 0.78, what happens after a couple of generations?
It's exponential decay.
Yeah.
If that rate holds, South Korea's population doesn't just shrink, it practically evaporates. You go from a generation of 100 people to 39 to 15.
Wow.
In just 3 generations, you've lost nearly 85% of your population.
That's not a decline, that's a deletion. And it's not just them, is it?
No, not at all. Japan is around 1.3. China, which remember spent decades enforcing a one-child policy to stop growth, is now officially at 1.3. And a lot of demographers think the real number is much lower.
I saw that in 2022, China's population actually shrank.
By nearly 1 million people.
1 million people. That's like a mid-sized city just vanishing from the census in a single year.
And Europe isn't immune either. Italy and Spain are barely hovering above 1. We're looking at a future where, in many of these countries, the next generation is going to be half the size of the one that came before it.
But hang on, there's another side to this coin. At the exact same time cradles are getting empty, we're all living longer than ever before.
Right. And that's the double whammy. Life expectancy has jumped by nearly a decade in the last 40 years, which is a triumph of science, obviously. Conquered diseases, we've improved nutrition, but demographically, it creates a very top-heavy world.
There was a stat that just blew my mind. 2018 was the first time in all of human history that there are more people over 65 than children under 5.
That was the tipping point. We are officially an old planet. In Japan, the average age is nearly 50. Just think about the energy of a society where the average person is middle-aged.
So we've established the what, the math is undeniable. Now we have to get to the why. Why did we just stop? Because biologically, isn't reproduction supposed to be the main drive?
It is. But humans are unique because we can override biology with economics. And the strongest correlation we see everywhere in the world is this. The richer and more urban a country gets, the fewer kids people have.
Which feels so counterintuitive. You'd think if I have more money, I should be able to afford more kids. In the old days, poor people had huge families.
That's because in an agrarian society, a farming society, a child is an economic asset. You have a kid, and by age 6 or 7, they're out working in the fields. They're producers. They contribute to the household.
Right, they pay for themselves.
Exactly. But in a modern, urban, knowledge-based economy, a child is not an asset. They are a liability, a very, very expensive luxury good.
I feel that personally, but let's put a number on it.
Okay, so in the US, raising a child to 18 costs about $230,000.
And that's before college.
Oh, yeah. If you want to send them to a university, you're looking at well over $300,000.
That's a house. You are literally choosing between having a child and buying a house.
And in a lot of places, you can't afford either one. I mean, look at housing. In London, the average home is 12 times the average income. In Tokyo, it's 11 times. If you're 28, you're paying off student loans, renting a tiny apartment. The math just doesn't work.
There's this quote from a South Korean sociologist that stuck with me. Young people aren't against children. They are against the poverty that comes with children.
It's a rational economic strike. But I think there's something even deeper than just the cash cost. There's an opportunity cost.
What do you mean by that?
Well, 50 years ago, women were largely locked out of the workforce. Today, women are, 70% of the workforce in many places? Having a child doesn't just cost you money anymore. It costs you time. It costs career progression. It costs freedom.
And this brings us to workplace culture, and specifically that Matahara concept we read about in Japan.
Yes, maternity harassment.
This part just made me angry. You have these companies in Japan crying out for labor, saying, we have no workers. But when a woman actually gets pregnant, she gets bullied into quitting.
It's incredibly short-term thinking.
It seems like terrible capitalism.
It is. A manager sees a pregnant woman and thinks, great, now I have a gap in my shift schedule for 6 months. They don't see the long-term demographic suicide. But the pressure is real. Women are forced to choose. Do you want to be a mother or do you want a career? Because the system won't let you do both.
And so increasingly, people are choosing the career or just choosing themselves.
That's the huge cultural shift. The default script for life used to be school, marriage, kids. That was the program. Now, kids are just one option on a big menu that includes travel, hobbies, personal fulfillment.
Plus, there's the anxiety factor. We can't ignore the birth strike movements. People looking at climate change, at political instability, and asking, is it even ethical to bring a child into this burning house?
It's a heavy question, but it's one that more and more young people are asking themselves.
Okay, so we have the what and the why. Now comes the so what. Because I can hear a listener saying, okay, fewer people. Maybe that's good. Rents will go down, beaches will be less crowded. What's the problem?
It sounds nice in theory, but our entire economic structure, it's built on a pyramid. And that pyramid is flipping upside down. The most immediate crash is the pension system.
The pension Ponzi scheme.
Essentially, yeah. We call it pay as you go. The taxes you pay today aren't sitting in a vault with your name on it. They're immediately paid out to your grandmother who is retired right now.
This works fine when you have like 5 workers for every 1 retiree.
Which is what we had in the 1960s. 5 people chipping in to support 1 person, totally sustainable. Today, in many countries, that ratio is 3 to 1. By 2050, we're heading toward 1.5 to 1.
1.5. That's impossible. You can't tax a worker enough to support themselves, their own family, and almost a full retiree on top of that.
You can't. The math breaks. You either have to tax young people into oblivion, which stops them from having kids, making the problem even worse, or you have to cut benefits for the elderly, which creates widespread poverty.
We saw this play out in France recently. The government tried to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 just 2 years, and the country practically burned down. Riots, garbage piling up in Paris.
And that was a tiny, tiny adjustment. Imagine when the system actually runs out of money. But honestly, the money is the easy part of the problem. We can print money. We cannot print people.
And this is where we get to the care crisis. This is the part that kept me up at night.
It should. An 85-year-old needs about 7 times more healthcare resources than a 40-year-old. But who is going to provide that care?
The numbers are just staggering. Germany needs 240,000 new medical workers by 2030. Japan needs 700,000.
And because we don't have them, we are seeing things that should never happen in wealthy, civilized nations.
The story from Canada really got to me. During the pandemic, the military had to go into nursing homes because the staff had just collapsed. And they found seniors dehydrated.
It wasn't that there was no water in the building. It's that there was no human hand available to lift the glass to a person's lips.
That is just a chilling image. In a G7 nation, people dying of thirst because of a labor shortage.
And in France, you had the Orpea scandal, rationing of diapers and food. This proves this isn't just about GDP or stock markets. This is about basic human dignity. When that population pyramid inverts, the most vulnerable people are the ones who suffer first.
It's not just healthcare, though. It's plumbers, electricians, bus drivers. We heard in Japan, profitable businesses are closing down just because the owner wants to retire, and there's literally no one to take over.
It's the great retirement. We're losing the people who know how to keep the lights on.
So, okay, we're facing a crisis. Humans are problem solvers. We have to be able to fix this. What are the solutions on the table?
Well, governments are trying everything. Solution 1 is the most obvious one, bribery. Just throw cash at parents.
Make kids cheaper.
Right. South Korea spent $200 billion over 16 years on baby bonuses, subsidies, you name it.
And the result of that $200 billion?
The birth rate went down.
Ouch. You spent a fortune to get a worse result.
Hungary is trying it too. Lifelong tax exemptions if you have 4 kids. They saw a tiny little bump, but nowhere near replacement level. The lesson seems to be that people don't make a 20-year commitment to a child for a cash bonus. If you don't have time or stability or hope, a check doesn't fix it.
Okay, so bribery fails. What about technology, the sci-fi solution? Robots will save us all.
Japan is betting the house on this. And there's some fascinating developments. You remember the Family Mart example?
Yeah, the convenience stores.
So you walk in, and a robot is stocking the drinks on the shelf. It looks like pure automation, but it's actually telemigration.
Right.
That robot is being remote controlled by a human sitting in a headset, maybe in the Philippines.
It's basically a video game, but instead of shooting aliens, you're stocking green tea in Tokyo.
Exactly. It allows labor to cross borders without the person actually moving. It's clever. But I have to be the skeptic here. Can a robot change a diaper gently? Can a robot empathetically listen to a dementia patient for an hour?
Probably not. And it certainly can't fix a complex plumbing leak in a 100-year-old house.
Right. Robotics can help with manufacturing, but the care economy and the skilled trades still need human hands. We can't automate our way out of loneliness.
Which leaves us with the third rail of politics, immigration, the so-called war for talent.
This is the main strategy for the English-speaking world. Canada, for example, is growing fast, but only because of immigration. In 2022, 96% of Canada's population growth came from people moving there.
96%. So without immigration, Canada is shrinking just like Japan.
Yes. And Germany has launched an opportunity card to try and lure people in. But here's the catch that people always forget. Immigrants age, too.
Right. Today's 25-year-old immigrant is tomorrow's 65-year-old retiree.
So it's a bit of a demographic Ponzi scheme. You need more and more immigrants just to support the previous wave. But the bigger problem is the supply. Where do these immigrants come from? Usually developing nations. But guess what? Birth rates are falling there too. Brazil, Mexico, Thailand, they're all dropping below replacement levels.
So eventually, everyone is just fishing in the same shrinking pond.
Exactly. The global supply of spare humans is running out.
Which leads us to the final and kind of miserable solution. Just work until you drop.
The retirement age solution. Denmark has actually pegged its retirement age to life expectancy. If you live longer, you work longer.
Which makes perfect sense on a spreadsheet in a government office. But if you're a bricklayer or a nurse with a bad back, telling them they have to work until they're 72 is just cruel.
It creates a massive class divide. Knowledge workers might be fine, but manual laborers will be broken. But in Japan, 25% of people over 65 are still working. That's the crystal ball for the rest of us.
I want to zoom out before we finish. We've talked about countries, but this changes the whole world map, doesn't it? Geopolitics.
It does. We are seeing a massive shift in gravity. The global north, the US, Europe, China, Japan is turning into a nursing home. The global south, India, Africa, is the nursery.
And India is the big story here.
India will soon have 1 billion working-age people. That is an engine of economic power that is it's hard to even comprehend. Nigeria is on track to become the 3rd most populous country on Earth.
So does the wealth just shift too? Does the global south take over?
That is the big if. Demographers call it the demographic dividend. Having a lot of young workers is great, but only if you have the schools to train them, the roads to move them, and the stability to employ them.
Right. If you have 1 billion young people and no jobs, you don't get an economic boom, you get a revolution.
Precisely. But if they can get the infrastructure right, the 21st century really could belong to the South. The old superpowers are going to be too busy paying for hip replacements to project power globally.
It really feels like we're watching the end of an era, the era of more.
We are. For the last 200 years, our entire civilization, capitalism, social safety nets, geopolitics, it was all based on one core assumption, that there would always be more people tomorrow than there were today.
Labor was cheap, people were surpluses.
And now we are entering an era of labor scarcity, people becoming the most precious resource on the planet.
We used to fight wars for land and then for oil. It sounds like now countries are going to compete for people.
And that changes the bargaining power, doesn't it? If you're a young, skilled worker today, you are a rare commodity. You have leverage that your parents never dreamed of.
That's a hopeful spin on it. But here's the provocation I want to leave our listeners with. We're staring at the end of infinite growth. If the population stabilizes or shrinks, the economy can't just keep getting bigger forever based on more consumers.
Right. That model is broken.
So what does a successful society look like that doesn't grow? Can we be prosperous and happy and stable in a world that is getting smaller? We've never had to answer that question before, but we have to answer it now.
It's the multi-trillion-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the answer is going to define the next century.
It's a lot to think about. Thank you all for taking this dive with us into what is arguably the biggest story of our lifetimes.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We'll see you next time. Goodbye.